On a scorching July morning in 1931, Dr. F. Bruce Russell steps into his hotel room in Las Vegas and locks the door behind him. He's just returned from a routine geological survey in Death Valley, and he should be packing to go home to Cincinnati. But instead, he's sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at a photograph he took underground. His hands are shaking, not from heat, not from exhaustion, but from what he's looking at in that photograph. And as he stares at this image, he makes a decision that will consume the next 16 years of his life and ultimately destroy him. What's going on, Midnight Mafia? Welcome back for another story, and this one is crazy. I'm telling you, make sure also to stick to the end because there's a secret message about something that you're going to want to hear. But without any further ado, as of now, it's time to slip into a mind that's not our own. Let's go. Dr. F. Bruce Russell isn't your typical 55-year-old physician. While most men his age are, settling into comfortable retirement homes in Cincinnati, Russell spends his free time exploring the most dangerous places on Earth. Death Valley in July, the Mojave Desert in August, places where the heat can kill you in hours and where the isolation can literally drive you mad. But Russell loves his solitude. He loves the silence. He loves the feeling that he's the only human being for miles in any direction. And on this particular morning in 1931, as he's walking across a remote section of Death Valley with his geological hammer and sample bags, Russell is thinking about how peaceful it is out here, and how quiet it is, and how perfectly, beautifully empty it is. But that's when the ground gives way beneath his feet. And Russell kind of doesn't have time to react. One moment he's walking on solid rock, and the next he's plunging 20 feet into darkness. He lands hard on his back. The wind knocked out of him. His equipment scattered around all in the dirt. For a moment, he just, lies there, checking for broken bones, trying to get his bearings back. And that's when he realizes something that literally makes his blood run cold. And that is, he's not in a natural cave. The walls around him are way too smooth, too uniform, too deliberately carved. So Russell, he lights his torch up and looks around. And what he sees makes absolutely no sense. The walls are polished to an almost mirror-like finish. The ceiling is perfectly arced, and stretching away into the darkness is a tunnel that looks like it was carved by a master craftsman. So Russell kind of tells himself he must be in this old mining operation, maybe something left over from the gold rush. But as he starts walking into the tunnel, he realizes that miners don't work like this. Miners don't polish walls. Miners don't create perfect arches. And miners definitely don't carve chambers like the one Russell is about to enter. This tunnel opens up into this massive room, easily 60 feet across and 30 feet high. The walls are covered in what appear to be these hieroglyphics, but not like anything Russell has ever seen. The symbols are way too complex, too alien. And in the center of the room, arranged in perfect rows, are stone platforms. And on those platforms are bodies. But they're not your normal bodies, no. They're wrong. Horribly, impossibly wrong. They're 8 feet tall or more, 10 feet, some even longer. The skulls are enormous, with eye sockets that could fit a man's fist. The rib cages are so large that Russell could crawl inside them. And the leg bones stretch nearly 4 feet long. So Russell, he's just shell-shocked and kind of just staring at these remains. And he thinks basically two things simultaneously. This changes everything we know about human history, and nobody will ever believe me. But luckily he has his camera, so he starts taking these, photographs, dozens of them. Close-ups of the skulls, wide shots of the chamber, detail shots of the hieroglyphics. And as he's working, he keeps thinking he hears something in the darkness beyond his torchlight. A sound almost like breathing. But that's impossible because these things obviously have been dead for centuries. So Russell spends about 3 hours in that chamber, documenting everything. And when he finally climbs out of that crevice and returns to his hotel room in Las Vegas, he's carrying evidence that could rewrite human history. But he's also carrying a secret that's going to eat him alive. Because Russell makes a decision that will haunt him for the rest of his life. Believe it or not, he decides to keep this a secret. He decides to go back. He decides to explore them more. And he decides to do it all alone. And for the next year, Russell makes monthly trips to Death Valley. Each time he discovers more chambers, more skeletons, more evidence of this advanced civilization that existed thousands of years before anyone thought possible. And each time he becomes a little bit more obsessed with the idea that he's found something that will literally change the world. But with this, Russell also becomes paranoid. He starts noticing things that just don't feel right. Fresh footprints in the dust near the entrance, tool marks on the walls that weren't there before, and sounds in the darkness that definitely aren't his imagination. And in 1932, Russell finally reaches out to someone that he trusts, Dr. Staniel S. Bovey, an archaeologist and mining engineer. Russell shows Bovey the photographs. He shows him the maps. He shows him the artifacts that he's collected. And Bovey's reaction confirms everything Russell hoped and feared. "This is real," Bovey says, staring at the photographs. "This is massive, and this is going to turn the scientific world upside down." But Bovey also says something that chills Russell to the bone. "If we're wrong about this, our careers are over. But if we're right, we're going to have enemies that we can't even imagine." So Russell and Bovey at this point start what they call the project. And for the next 15 years, they make regular trips to Death Valley. They map the entire tunnel system. They catalog what they find. They create detailed sketches and photographs. And what they discover is beyond anything they could have ever imagined. The underground complex isn't just a burial site. It's a city. A massive, sprawling city that stretches for miles in every direction. They find this Hall of the Giants, where dozens of these oversized skeletons are arranged in these ceremonial positions. They find chambers filled with extinct animals, saber-toothed cats, mammoths, even what appear to be dinosaur remains. And they are all perfectly preserved by this dry desert air. But here is what really gets their attention. The deeper they go, the more advanced the construction becomes. The walls in the lower levels aren't just, carved smooth. They are polished to perfection. And some rooms have what appear to be this artificial lighting system built into the stone itself. I mean, you want to talk about the pyramids, this is similar. And there are corridors that seem to stretch for miles with ventilation systems that still function after thousands of years. But Russell was very diligent, so, he starts keeping a detailed journal about everything. He writes about his discoveries that sound like science fiction, rooms filled with artifacts made from metals that he can't identify, hieroglyphic-style carvings that don't match any known ancient language, and chambers where the air feels unnaturally warm despite being hundreds of feet underground. But Russell also starts to write about things that scare him. The sounds in the darkness, shadows that move when they shouldn't, and the growing certainty that they're not alone down there. 10 years later, in 1943, Russell writes in his journal, "Found evidence that someone else has been in the lower chambers. Fresh torch marks on the walls, footprints in the dust. And in the Hall of Giants, several of the skeletons have been moved, not by us." In 1944, he says, "Heard voices deep tunnels today. Couldn't understand the words, but they weren't speaking English or any language that I recognize." Then, in 1945, Bovey refuses to go into the lower levels anymore, says that the air down there makes him sick, but I think he's scared. I think we both are, he wrote. But then in 1946, Russell makes a discovery that changes everything. You see, he is exploring a section of the complex that they've never mapped out before when he finds a chamber that stops him cold. It's filled with modern equipment, radios, lanterns, camping gear, and arranged on stone shelves are dozens of these glass jars, each one containing what appears to be preserved human organs. Russell just stares at the jars and thinks, someone is living down here. Someone who doesn't want to be found. But then he notices something that makes his heart stop. In the center of the chamber, arranged in a circle, are 12 of the giant skeletons. But these aren't lying down like the others. These are sitting up. And their empty eye sockets are facing inward, as if they're watching something in the center of the circle. And in the center of this circle is a modern skeleton, a normal-sized human skeleton, picked clean with clothes still clinging to the bones, recent clothes. And pinned to the shirt is a name tag, Dr. William Henderson, University of California, Berkeley. And Russell, he has never heard of Dr. William Henderson. But he knows one thing for certain. This man was killed, and recently. And whoever killed him is still down here. So Russell, he starts hearing footprints more and more behind him in the tunnels. Not echoes, not his imagination, actual footsteps. Trying to, stay quiet, trying to match his own pace. Every time he stops, they stop. Every time he turns around, there's nothing there but darkness. And by 1947, Russell is getting desperate. He's in his 70s now, and he's starting to realize that this discovery is bigger than what he can handle. But he's also starting to realize that he's actually in danger, real danger, from someone who has been living in the tunnels for years, someone who has been watching him, someone who doesn't want this secret to get out. That's when Russell makes a decision that will cost him his life. He decides to go public. So Russell and Bovey start forming a company called Amazing Explorations Incorporated. And they bring in investors. They begin planning a massive press event to reveal everything. Photographs, artifacts, maps, even human remains from the Hall of Giants. And they schedule the press conference for July 20th, 1947. But Russell also makes another decision. He decides to make one final trip to the tunnels. He wants to retrieve the most shocking artifacts for the presentation. He wants to get irrefutable proof that will silence the skeptics forever. And on July 15th, 1947, Russell loads his car with equipment and drives towards Death Valley. He tells several people in Las Vegas that he's going to retrieve artifacts that will change history forever. He seems excited, confident, ready to finally share his secret with the world. But Russell also does something that he's never done before. He tells his hotel clerk in Las Vegas that if he doesn't return by July 18th to call the police. And he gives the clerk a sealed envelope with instructions to open it if something happens to him. And on July 17th, Russell enters the tunnels for one last time. And according to his journal, which is found later, he goes straight to the chamber where he found Dr. Henderson's remains. He wants to retrieve the skeleton as evidence of the danger in the tunnels. But when Russell reaches the chamber, Dr. Henderson's skeleton is gone. And in its place is a note written in these block letters. You're next. And Russell's final entry into his journal, dated July 17, 1947 at 3:47 p.m. reads, "They know I'm here. I can hear them moving in the tunnels behind me. Multiple voices, multiple footsteps. I'm going to try to make it back to the surface, but I don't think they're going to let me leave." The journal entry ends right there mid-sentence. "I can see lights coming up the main tunnel. They're not using torches, they're using electric..." And it ends. 3 days later, Russell's car is found abandoned on the edge of Death Valley, 20 miles from the nearest road. and the engine is dead. The keys are still in the ignition. Inside the vehicle are maps, his journal, a suitcase with clothes, and his wallet with all his money still inside. But there is no sign of Russell. The search teams go and find something else that chills them to the bone. Russell's maps of the underground complex are covered in red ink. Every entrance he had marked is now labeled sealed or blocked. And written across the top of the map in handwriting that's not Russell's are the words, "The agreement has been made." The search for Russell is eventually called off. The official ruling is that he likely died of exposure or became lost and succumbed to the elements. But the timing is beyond suspicious. He disappears just 3 days before the press conference that was supposed to change history? So the story breaks in the San Diego Union on August 4th, 1947, told by Howard E. Hill of National Research Society. Hill describes the underground city, the giant remains, and the advanced artifacts. But he also mentions that Russell had been receiving death threats in the weeks prior to his disappearance. And when reporters go and try to follow up on this story, they discover something shocking. Dr. Bovey has also disappeared. Not dead, not missing, just gone. His house is empty, his bank account is closed, his colleagues at the university say he never worked there. It's almost as if he never existed. But the most chilling detail comes from the sealed envelope that Russell left with the hotel clerk in Las Vegas. Inside the envelope is a single photograph. It shows the chamber where Russell found Dr. Henderson's skeleton. But in this photograph, there are 13 skeletons arranged in a circle, not 12. And the 13th skeleton is wearing Dr. Russell's clothes. The photograph is dated July 16th, 1947, 1 day before Russell's final journal entry, 1 day before he disappeared. Over the years, you have treasure hunters and researchers that have scoured Death Valley looking for the cave entrances that Russell described. Several claim that they have actually found similar openings, only to return later and find them sealed shut or collapsed. Some believe that the government knew about the site and shut it down. Others think something else was responsible. Fast forward to 1996, a geologist working for a mining company reported seeing military trucks blocking off an unmarked canyon entrance. And then when he returned a week later, the entire area had been sealed with concrete. And when he tried to file a report, he was told that the area didn't exist on any official map. Today, the Bureau of Land Management has restricted access to several areas in Death Valley. Some caves have been sealed due to safety risks. Others are classified as environmentally sensitive areas. But local park rangers report strange things. Unmarked federal vehicles patrolling roads that don't appear on any maps. Electromagnetic anomalies that cause equipment to malfunction. And sounds coming from underground that definitely aren't natural. In 2019, a retired park ranger named Thomas Mitchell came forward with a confession that changed everything. For 30 years, he said, he had been part of a secret operation to monitor Death Valley underground sites. Not to keep people out, but to keep something in. According to Mitchell, the government had known about Russell's discovery since 1943. They'd been watching him, following him. And when he decided to go public, they made him an offer that he couldn't refuse. But I guess Russell did not take the deal. He tried to expose the truth anyway. And that's when the real occupants of the underground city made their own offer. An offer that came with a price that Russell couldn't pay. Mitchell's confession includes classified documents that reveal the truth about what happened to Dr. Russell. Documents that show the government has been in contact with something living beneath Death Valley since 1947. Something that has been making agreements with human authorities for decades. And the agreements are simple. the underground inhabitants are left alone. And in exchange, they only take people who know too much. People who threaten to expose their existence. People like Dr. Russell. According to Mitchell, Russell didn't die in Death Valley. He was taken into the underground city to join the others who had learned too much. Dr. Henderson from Berkeley, Dr. Bovey, and dozens of others over the years. The photograph that Russell left in the sealed envelope wasn't a prediction. It was a warning. The 13th skeleton in the circle wasn't Russell. It was the person who would replace him if he didn't keep quiet. But Russell chose to speak anyway. He chose to risk everything to tell the world the truth. And somewhere beneath, Death Valley and the tunnels that stretch for miles, Dr. F. Bruce Russell is still alive, still documenting, still trying to find a way to warn the world about what's living beneath that desert. The question isn't whether Dr. Russell found an underground city filled with giants. The question is how many people have disappeared trying to find them? And what happens when the current agreement expires? Because, according to Mitchell's documents, the deal the government made in 1947 does have a termination date. And that date is actually coming up very soon. Now, for those of you that saw the Die Glock episode last week by Carol Ann from The In-Between, and then saw my Kecksburg episode, that was part 1 and part 2. Let me know in the comments right now and hit that like button if you think I should do a part 3, and maybe she will do a part 4 if there's enough of you asking for it. Because believe me, I found out some things about the Die Glock or the Kecksburg UFO that, let's just say it'll blow your mind. That's all I got for you guys today. I'll see you next time. Cheers.